Ranukka, according to the Labour Force Malaysia report, the unemployment rate in Malaysia has worsened to 4.8% in December 2020. And knowing that so many people are looking for jobs, how do you make a good first impression during an interview?
Right. Okay. So I think in this aspect, right, I would really look at this from two point of views. One of it is really before the interview starts, what are some preparations that you need to have? I'm not talking about your CV and all that. I'm talking about your image per se,
Mhm.
right? So the first point here is your perception positioning, which means before you even go into a particular interview, how do you want the interviewers to really see you? So you
Ah.
have to really think of it from a visualization point of view. Like, when you go in, what is the first thing that you want them to really have in their mind when they see you? So that really helps you to kind of backtrack a little bit and understand how exactly to position yourself in that way, you know?
So you're talking about sort of the impression you want them to have of you. So sort of
Correct.
crafting that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So basically, it's from an interviewer's point of view
Yeah.
who's hiring for a particular position. What do they want to hire or who they want to hire? But is that like, do you need to, like, if you're not that person?
Or even how do you know what they're looking for
Correct, yeah.
so that the
Yeah.
impression you're giving fits with them? How do you find that out?
Yeah, so I think that's really a lot to do with research at first. So a lot of times in an interview, right, the first step I always tell candidates is that you need to research this particular job that you're going for. What is it all about? The culture of this company. Do you really fit right into it? And then what is it so unique about you that you really can stand out in that interview? Because I guess at this point we also realize that supply is definitely more than demand, right? So we also need to understand in the interview context whether it is going to be a one-to-one interview, is it going to be a many-to-one, or is going to be a one-to-many? Because in this world right now, we also realize that there's a lot of companies who do group interviews in that sense. So you might be facing a situation where when you go into the interview room, it's going to be you and another maybe 5 to 6 other candidates who are also going for the same job, meeting one particular interviewer.
Oh gosh, when you were saying
Yeah.
group, I thought you meant like sort of 5 people from the company interviewing one of you, whereas now
No, no.
you're saying 5 of you interviewees,
Yeah.
meeting one person at the same time.
Yeah.
Gosh, that can be quite intimidating, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's really where, your perception positioning, really making sure that you stand out very subtly, but obviously in a very obvious way is important. And I realize this is it's getting into a trend right now, especially when it comes to Zoom interviews, because again, supply more than demand, right? So everyone's trying to save time as well in some ways.
So perception positioning, if you could explain what that is sort of as simply as possible so we can grasp it, would be
Right.
so helpful.
Right. So what I mean by perception positioning is really understanding, right? When someone sees you for the very first time, or even like throughout the entire interview, what do you want them to expect to actually see you in you? So that's really the perception that you need to create. So it really stems from not just how you look, but maybe your behavior, how you speak. All these aspects, right, really need to kind of craft into that whole perception that you're creating here. So example, right? Let's say the perception that you want to create when you go into this job interview is that you want to be seen as someone trustable, someone that is hardworking, someone that perhaps even though looks young but exudes a very professional outlook. So all these things, right, has to be written down. Okay, this is how you want someone to see you. Now backtracking, right? How do you want to dress? Example, to show people that you have that kind of trustability and professionalism. Yeah.
Okay, so there's the adage, dress for the job you want, not for the job you have.
Correct.
And when you sort of think about this sort of statement, how does one align? How does one align the criteria of the company with who you are, and dressing for that? Because it will be different, most
Yeah.
probably, from what you were doing before.
Correct. So I think first things first is really the style of, if we're talking about appearance right now, right? First of all, the style of dressing, we really have to look at the company's, value and culture perspective. So example, the definition of professional wear. can be very different from one company to another, one industry from another, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So I think first things first is, of course, like maybe ringing up HR and asking them, like if I'm coming for an interview, what's expected from me? What really do I want to dress? Because a lot of people assume that when you go for an interview, it's better to overdress than to underdress.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not. It's
yeah.
not true at all. It's not true.
Oh, really?
Yes, because imagine this, right? Say, for example, you're going into a startup community, a startup company, right? And then you are all in suit and tie, and
Right,
you can already expect the person that's interviewing you would be in jeans and t-shirt, right?
right.
Yeah. So when you're overdressed, it kind of also to the interviewer, it feels very overwhelming in some ways. So one of the things that a lot of people don't realize when it comes to appearance or maybe dressing is that it really helps to build a sort of rapport with the person that you're speaking to as well. Yeah. So there's a saying that people like people who are like themselves. So
Right.
imagine if you're in a suit and tie and this guy is in jeans and t-shirt, Mark Zuckerberg style example.
Right.
I mean, like the opportunities of building that rapport are going to be really slim.
But you shouldn't go in a t-shirt and jeans
No,
also, though,
yeah,
right?
correct. So, like example, let's say we are talking about this startup company that you're going for.
Hmm.
So you already know that their dress style is a little bit more casual. So instead of a suit and tie, perhaps you can go with maybe a shirt without a tie. So you're still presenting yourself in a very respectful manner. You want to show a level of eagerness, but you now understand that they are not that. They are not very traditional, formal. Example. So understanding that first, and then okay, and knowing that, all right, example, I'm going to be wearing a shirt now. I've gotten the dress code right. Next is like, how can I really differentiate myself? Maybe it's the color that I choose. Maybe it's the style. Perhaps how I for women, example, how do you want to really coordinate your colors, example. So all these little things, right? Even though it might seem very minute, it really does play a part in generally how people see you, the perception itself.
So, are you saying that, wearing the right outfit is actually a psychological sort of armor?
Yes, definitely. Because imagine this, right? Your first impression doesn't happen when you just sit down and you say hi to the interviewer. Your first impression starts when you open the door, actually, right? And in the case of Zoom interviews, your first impression is even when you're in the waiting room. How long are you waiting there? Whether the interview is 10, the interview session is 10, were you there at 10 or were you there at 9:50? Things like that really makes a difference. And imagine again, right? In Zoom interviews, when people are conducting it virtually, there's already a perception that it will be faster. There's not much small talks that will be happening as compared to when you're doing it face to face.
Hmm.
So
Right.
when there's lesser small talk, you also know that there'll be lesser chance of you building a sort of chemistry or rapport with that person. Now, how can that person like you if they don't really know you that much? It's really through visual, cues that this person is looking at, right? Like, oh, okay, does it look visually pleasing? Do I like what I see?
Hmm.
And that can ultimately also help you in that entire interview context as well.
So you was mentioning earlier about sort of rapport, and you're saying now sort of that visual connection, like in a Zoom thing. How does one actually figure out what people in that company wear? Because, like, for example, I wouldn't know where to start. Like, I would Google the
Yeah.
company, and
Yeah.
you'd have the standard stock pictures of maybe the people in there, and they're the profile shots they've had done for the company. But there's no like
Right.
sneaky Facebook backdoor where you can go and see what they really are like in there. So
Yeah.
how do people get a sense of which direction is the right direction?
So I think there's few ways of going with it. I mean, if my personal opinion is, of course, you can definitely ask around. Sometimes if you are already in the industry, asking around perhaps can give you a good idea in a sense of like what's their dress code like. But if not, right, then it's really just on the gauge of like the industry itself, the company, as well as maybe what the HR is sharing with you. I think that itself, at least to me, right, when you call and you inquire all these things, right, it gives people a sense that you're really serious about it.
So
Yeah.
the act of your researching actually is a feather in your cap,
Yes.
their
Right, right.
perspective,
So
right?
when they see you dressed a certain way, oh wow, you're wearing our colors and everything. How did you know?
Yeah.
Oh well, I did some research on you, and then they say, oh, he put in some effort.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
exactly.
All right. Oh, you're not like a voyeur, right?
Yeah. So, okay, let me ask, how how can we be unique and stand out when with workplaces that are still considered quite conservative? So JD and I were talking earlier about the idea, for example, the stock exchange, or what did you say?
I
JD
said
was
the
like the
FBI.
FBI, right?
But,
He was like,
no, if you want to work for the FBI, it's definitely going to be the penguin
the
suit,
Men in
right?
Black.
There's nothing you
Yeah.
can change about it, right?
So how do we kind of, in those kind of situations stand out?
Right. So I think let's talk about maybe very conservative corporate industries, like right. I think a lot of times when you think about those kind of industries, ultimately people feel that I need to just be in very neutral colors and very traditional looks, example. But I would say, right, based on my observations and how I usually advise my clients, is that first of all you need to look at like what's the vibe you want to give people, and on the vibe itself, right, you also need to look at you as a person. So the first impression people have of you, generally, what are those? And then look at what are some of the impressions that you intend to have. Now all these little things, right, really plays a part in, first of all, the color that you choose when it comes to what you wear. The second thing is the fit of what you wear, the choice of like fit, even for men. By the way, I am certified in men's styling, so like for men, right, it's not just shirt and pants, and there's a lot of things that we really take into consideration. The
Wow.
material, even the prints of like what kind of print, when you go pinstripe or you go herringbone, all these little things, right,
Wow.
plays a part in the perception that you showcase out. And it's
This
really weird, right? But it's true. When you see someone, immediately you would feel like, okay, this person is giving me this sort of vibe. And many of the times, right, you might not even realize that you're giving that.
So these are the
Yeah.
subconscious cues that
Yeah.
we're not aware that we're giving off, that now you're saying we need to become aware of, because that's the only way we're going to kind of get ahead a little bit of everybody else who's going for the
Yeah,
same job.
exactly.
Okay, Ranukka, let me just ask you, um, so that we get a better, clearer idea of this, I always love to have a before and after sort of case study. So,
Okay.
could you share with us a success story of someone that you've worked with or
Right.
helped, what was going on before, what they kind of changed, and what the outcome of that was?
All right. So the example I'm giving is not necessarily this person going for an interview, but rather just a professional, right?
Mhm.
So I'm going to share with you a very extreme, can I say makeover? Yeah, maybe a
Yes,
makeover, right?
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So I have this client who is an artist. So she's a painter. She paints contemporary art, but she used to be a lawyer by profession.
Mhm.
So every time when someone sees her now as an artist, right, nobody can tell that she's an artist. Everyone seems to
Okay,
feel that she's a lawyer for
right. She
sure.
still looks like a lawyer.
She still looks like a lawyer. She's definitely in something a little bit more corporate, the feel of it is still there, right? And
Mhm.
of course, it is not to say detrimental, but obviously if someone can't really tell what you do, you need to take a lot more effort in explaining and a lot of convincing, right?
Oh, I
Yeah.
love that. If people can't sort of have a sense of you, it does require more effort on your part, which is kind of works against you. I love that. I'm going to
Yeah.
remember that. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah. So what happens is that when she came to me, she told me like the first thing I remember when I sat down and spoke to her, she asked me, "What do you think I do for a living?" She asked me that. Then I said, I'm gonna guess you're either a trainer because she was really fit, right? She's really, really toned and fit. Or I'm gonna guess that you're probably a lawyer. And she's like, oh my God, like that's what everyone's saying about me. Yeah. And what happened was that after that, I really sat down and understood from her, like, what are some of the impressions that you want? What's something so unique about you versus other painters? What do you want people to know you for? When people see you and see your work, right? And so, based on all the information that she's given me, what I did was that I kind of crafted the entire, we call it the ABC experience, the appearance, behavior, and the style of how she communicates, whether it's in her
Oh, that's
social
brilliant.
Oh,
media. Yeah.
ABC.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so in that aspect, right, first of all, the appearance part, I told her, right, of course I'm not going to make you like super artistic because your client base are still corporate. It's just that you're
Mm-hmm.
an artist targeting corporates, right? So there's still a little bit of element of corporate look into it, but the colors, maybe the style of the structure of what you wear has to be a little bit more of an artistic flair.
Hmm.
Even like maybe the color of your hair a little bit, it should kind of give people a taste like, okay, I might not know that she's an artist, but I know she's in the artistic field. Yeah.
Right. Okay. The hints, the little hints.
Correct. Yeah. So after that, I did ask her. I said like, okay, once we have done our whole program, I asked her, what do your friends think, or your clients? Then she told me like they now understand that I'm an artist. Yeah.
Wow.
So
That's brilliant.
you can see that really things like that, especially right, people who are pivoting careers, like maybe they were something initially and then they changed into something entirely different, even like myself, right? You need to understand that your image, your personal brand has to also kind of change because you're in an entirely different environment now already.
I love what you're saying there, because a lot of people have had to, by virtue of the market being the
Yeah,
way it is, jump into different industry areas where
exactly.
they're not used to, or whatever. It's like a new start for them, a new edition. They become a new edition.
Metamorphosis.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Version 2.0,
Yeah.
version
Yes.
COVID, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
I'm not diminishing this, but
Yeah.
it
It
we
is.
were laughing about it earlier, right?
Yeah, I love the story though. So if anybody who actually wants to get a job as a lawyer, though, she should get in touch with that artist that you helped with now, and then
Yeah.
figure out how to do it the opposite way.
The opposite way, right?
reverse engineer it.
But I know exactly what you mean, because the last time, because I left the radio world for a while, and I was I went into the corporate world, but I went to a startup. The
Yeah.
last corporate job that I had, I was in a bank, right? So
Okay.
so I was in a suit and everything. So I went for
Right.
the interview with this startup, and I just came from radio, and I was like dressed up, but they were like, "You don't really dress like this every day, right?" I said, "No, but for this I did lah." But because it was for a slightly higher role, it was for a director's role and a regional role. So I'm like, okay, they hired me based on what I've done, but they're like, yeah, don't wear that anymore. I'm like, okay, no, I will not. Yeah.
Actually, that's a really interesting point you've brought up. So, say you've got this job interview coming up. It's in a different industry, and you've kind of done a bit of research, and you think, okay, I need to sort of present myself more in this direction,
Right.
because it's correct. And you get the job, but it's totally not you. Like, I'm not saying the job's not you, but how you've presented yourself is something that is unfamiliar, doesn't really start to begin to feel familiar. How does that impact it when you're giving the right impression for the job, but it's not the right impression of you, the true impression of you?
I think that really talks about consistency, right? Like, that's something, a reality that I see a lot of candidates experiencing, where they really go on a high in their interviews, right? Really all out. This is the best. It's kind of like dating, right? The first date, you really look your best, you're in your best behavior, and then as time goes by, oh man, like it just kind of
House
fizzles
dress,
off.
house dress, and singlet and slippers. Yeah.
Yeah, but so in this case, right, I guess the first part here is that my advice to candidates is never assume that going all out with the suit and tie is really the right impression that you need to have in an interview. It's not true, actually. And in fact, like I know this is very contradicting to what a lot of people write in articles, where like, okay, what to wear for an interview: black, blue, gray, and then like wear the suit. You can never go wrong. I don't agree with that, in fact. And I think that is what a lot of people feel like, that's assumingly that's the right thing I should do. But maybe think about it this way, right? If you were to have like maybe showed off a little bit of your own flair, perhaps example, the best way to be memorable, I always tell people, is not really the suit and tie, but you have to look at contrast, actually. So
Contrast. Okay, what do you mean by that?
yeah. So contrast it means like what you're wearing. Example, if you're wearing a blazer, like a sports jacket with like a shirt inside, right? The contrast between your shirt and the jacket, right, has to be high.
Oh,
Yeah. So
right.
that's really the one that really makes a big difference. Not so much of like you're wearing black, blue, and gray, things like that.
So you don't
So-
blend in.
So you can
Exactly.
wear blue, but wear fuchsia with blue, and then you'll be like,
Yeah.
oh, okay.
Yeah, and because right, remember, always also need to remember, like in an interview, the whole day, you're not the only one they're interviewing. So they have to have something to remember you for, right? Like, I mean, obviously your entire presence, your credentials has to speak for itself. But I mean, like visual cues is always something that people remember of. Like, okay, that girl, she's the one with the blue jacket and the fuchsia blouse,
Yeah.
Yeah. So things like that are very important.
So that's brilliant. It's not about making an impression, it's making the right impression.
Yeah.
Right for you as well as right for the company.
Yeah.
Okay, so is there a difference, or what different things should we take into account when doing an online interview versus an in-person interview?
Oh yeah, okay. When it comes to online, right, the first thing you want to look at is, of course, the setting of your entire interview session. Now, I have actually been part of like some of these mock interviews that I've helped some of my connections on LinkedIn with. And here's the thing, right? Maybe it's mock, maybe it's me. I don't know. Like, so everyone's very chill about it. But there's a few observations that I really noticed about things like that. First things first is, of course, the background and what you're wearing. Obviously have like a bit of contrast, don't blend into the background, right?
Okay.
And
White. You're a bit
Yeah,
blendy.
I'm all blended in. Yeah.
yeah, so like, and then the second thing is, of course, like, making sure that there is really no distractions at your background. Making sure that when you're talking, the interviewer of the other person in the other line, right, is really focusing on you and not anything that's happening behind. That though all those things are really important. And for candidates that are going through like Zoom interviews, right, you also have to understand that right now it's just this square that people are seeing you in, right? So good news, you can be wearing a pajamas down there. Nobody cares. Nobody can see that, right? But everything that's happening here is now going into a Zoom focus. Everyone's looking at this. So, like example, things like body language. Looking at the camera versus looking down. All these things are very important. Yeah, because like, you want to make sure that when someone is talking, right, it has to feel like I'm talking to you, right? If I'm looking at the camera, it feels I'm talking to you. If I'm looking down and looking at myself, right, your eyes are actually downward.
Right, right.
So all these things really helps in rapport building, actually.
That's interesting. Okay, so there was something I wanted to ask you that you were mentioning, and it's gone from my memory. It's just flown right out of my head now. No, but it was so important. Um, um, um,
No?
Hang on,
no, it's
sorry
okay.
guys,
Go
I
ahead.
I can't seem to be hearing you guys very clearly though.
Oh no, it's an internet thing.
Oh, okay.
Let me pause it for a while. Right here.
Okay, I just want to pause for a second and go back to the part about you saying, you can wear your pajamas on the bottom. And we know that a lot of people have been caught out on that, right? But I just wanted to ask because we're talking from a psychological standpoint throughout this whole thing, our subconscious impressions, all of these things which are sort of intangible almost.
Right.
Is is there merit to actually getting fully dressed out, even if you're from home? Because if you're wearing pajamas and sort of feeling more comfortable at the bottom, like I find that in order to be sort of more switched on, if I'm hosting a workshop or I'm doing a more serious chat, that I have to be dressed. The bottom has to be dressed as
Dress to
much
the
as the
T,
top.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, agree. In fact, that's something that I do every day as well. Like I dress as if like I'm going out to work. Sometimes when I'm going down to get my food delivery, I can see the confusion of people like, oh, okay, she looks like she just came back from somewhere, I think it does really make an impact, especially to yourself. It does really make a difference where you feel that you're in the zone. I guess in terms of like how you kind of carry yourself in that entire interview might change as well. There might be a difference in that way.
Yeah, because when you put on the right shoes, you walk differently, don't you? You have that sort of stand.
Right.
Does that happen with boys?
In a way, because that's why everyone says, "Oh, you clean up good," right? So you want to dress
Right.
up in a way. So, but
Okay.
I'm thinking like sometimes also when you're doing an interview, because you are doing it online and nobody sees the bottom half, right? When you go for an interview, you're kind of stressed out and you're kind of tense. If you
Right.
don't dress up, sometimes do you relax a bit also?
Yeah, I think in that sense, right, I always feel that when someone goes for an interview, I'm not sure why, but deciding what to wear always is a last minute thing. You know what I mean? It
Mm,
is always decided, like, let's say your interview is 10 a.m., it's decided at 8 a.m. Nobody really thinks about it before.
that's
But
true.
yeah, but it should be something that you should think about way earlier because that's the first thing, right? That's the first impression that you want to carry. Yeah.
And also all that stress you have and getting hot and sweaty and trying on different things and not finding the right thing and going,
Yes.
okay, this will do. That's going to actually color and shape your energy vibe as well when you're turning up for an interview, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think even for women, I always tell them like if you're not that great with makeup, right? Don't think that 8 a.m. on that day is a good time to learn, or to practice. You probably want to do it
Guilty.
earlier. Probably want to do it a little bit earlier, just to try out a few things so that
Mm.
on that day itself it's a breeze. It's you feel calmer.
you're comfortable
Right.
doing it.
So don't do
Yeah.
it's just something I threw on. Don't do that. You really
Oh,
need to
yeah.
effort.
Yeah.
It
Okay.
really makes a big difference,
All right.
truly.
Okay, so let me ask you, if you could, in summary, help us out here, what advice would you give to someone going for a job interview? You've mentioned your ABCs. Is there an abridged version of your ABC that we can all do ourselves when we have a job interview?
Yeah, it's let's say someone's listening to the interview today and they've got an interview later on in the afternoon. How
Or
to,
Okay.
tomorrow, yeah.
yeah.
Oh dear. Okay, later in the afternoon. So
Let's
that's
just say-
that's a
Or
very
tomorrow,
short.
lah.
Let's say tomorrow. Let's say tomorrow. But
yeah.
how can we apply your sort of ABC in a very simplistic way to sort of get us on the right track?
Okay, so first thing, shall I go with the ABC or like, because I have like a few steps that I want to make sure.
You tell us.
Go with a few
All right,
steps. Go with a
okay.
few steps.
You tell us.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think if tomorrow is your interview, all right, it's literally like 24 hours to go, right? Your first step is definitely, and I know this is like a very common sense kind of thing, but you really have to research the job scope itself. Really understand it and understand whether you are qualified for it and not because you're desperate, therefore you're coming for this interview. Second thing in terms of researching is also researching the company that you're going for, the culture. Research a little bit on Glassdoor example. Know a little bit about the background, how people are in there. The values that this company has. Does it really resonate with you? That's the first part here, right? The preparation area. Now that you have known all of these things, right? The next thing you have to really ask yourself is, when I go in, right? What do I want the interviewers to see and feel about me? Now that just lists down three things. Nothing too complicated, just three things, right? But of course, make it into a sentence. Don't say that I want them to feel I'm professional, trustworthy. I mean, professional, right, is very subjective.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
yeah. So just write down like exactly when they first see you, what's that first vibe that you want them to have in their mind?
Can you give us an example of how that would be best written?
Okay, so like example, you can say that, when I walk in, I would like the interviewer, when they see me, to feel that, I'm the best fit for it. They like me instantaneously. They find me they would find me easy to work with. So these are like some things that perhaps you can actually create. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. So once that is done, once you have listed this down, next you go into the A, B's, and C's. First is appearance. Now, if you want to be seen as likable, in my example here, how can you be seen likable in terms of your attire? Especially if you're someone who has always gotten the first impression that people say if I don't smile, I have a resting tooth face. Like, you know? Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're someone like that, right, you know that it will take you a bit more effort to seem approachable. Example, right? So you have to perhaps research a little bit, like, okay, what colors, example, that I can wear that would make me a little bit more friendlier. Maybe
Soften.
something a bit softer, right? A bit
Does that
softer.
mean wearing lighter colors? Is that or does that not always work?
Lighter colors, yeah, in some ways. So when we say softer colors, it could be maybe a warmer tone, perhaps like an orange, or like a pink. For men as well, like pastel pinks, things like that. That could really kind of
Brighten
give
you
people
up,
that
yeah.
kind of
Happify you. Happify
yeah,
you.
a cheerful vibe, example,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, so that's the appearance part. Then the second thing is behavior. So now you have to think, if this is the perception I want to create, right? How do I go into this interview, right, with the right type of behavior that would continuously make people feel that way about me? So example, like again, the example of you want to look approachable, but you have that face, right? So maybe a constant smile, an upward lift, when you're talking, seem a bit more eager, a bit more of a nod, a bit more eye contact. So all these little things are in the behavior part. Then communication is, of course, how you really speak with clarity, whether you're able to enunciate things well, all these things really is a continuation and holistically really helps with your image.
So I like listen to you. I would actually write this on a small little card and take it with me in my handbag, so I could
Yeah.
just have that and just focus on that rather than anything else or the other 5 people in the room with me being interviewed.
ABC, ABC.
Yeah, exactly. And especially a strong advice to those of you who are going into like a 1 versus 5 interview. That means one interviewer versus 5 candidates here. do not go in with a that's why research is so important, right? I realize a lot of candidates come back of this and say that, oh my god, I didn't realize this was a group interview. Like, how could you not know, right?
Right.
So really, that's why the research is so important. When you're going in with 5 candidates, right, always remember that the subtleties of your image, the ABCs, right, will help you stand out. So don't think the loudest one in the room will always stand out. It is always the one that it's always the one that really stands out, in a sense where, like, the first impression when I see, like, oh, okay, wow, nice, well groomed, very put together.
Okay.
Yeah. So you just have to think of it from there.
Sometimes the loudest one gets the job also, though.
Depending on industry, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine that would work in a library.
No, yeah, exactly.
Right.
I was just thinking about another thing. Like, if you're applying to be a fashion buyer for a
Okay.
company, and then you're doing a Zoom call, I think it's best to get everything dressed up, because who knows? As a fashion,
Yeah.
they might want to see what you're wearing also, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Please,
I
could
would-
you stand up? Can I?
I know, right? I'm like, no. Oh no, the connection is so bad. Bye.
Yeah, it's kind of like, maybe if that's the case, right, perhaps you want to prop your laptop
Yeah.
in a way where you can see a fuller view of yourself.
But it goes back to research of the company also, right?
Yeah, definitely. You know,
So I want to ask one more thing though, and this is just an aside here. But colors how do I phrase this? Give me a second. Let me. My cog in my mind. Cog is in my cog. I only have one.
Okay. Ken? No?
Do you really need to pay attention to the colors that suit you? So, for example, I've been given advice about particular colors, especially for events. Oh, you should wear this color, that color. But honestly, if I wear bright yellow, it looks awful on me. And
Yeah.
yet, this is cheerful. This is nice and friendly. It's like
Right.
I look like Tweety Bird who's been too long in a Miami sun,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, example, let's say just now you mentioned about yellow, right? So in terms of yellow, there's lots of hues and tones to it. Now, if let's say yellow gives a very cheerful vibe, that's why this particular person suggested you wear it in an event. Perhaps the tone of what kind of yellow that you wear has to be really looked into. So, like, for you, like, off the bat, like, if I look at your skin tone, I mean, like, we've known each other, so I guess you're a bit warmer, right? You're warm skin tone. So anything that's a little bit too pastel maybe would kind of like drain you off a little bit,
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So
Granny-ish.
yeah, so the tones and hues also play a particular part in it, but that is very, I would say that goes into color analysis. That's a deeper conversation altogether.
Right.
So every time when people ask me in terms of advice of what to wear, I always say, like, really think about the color, what it really represents, and does that really help you convey the message well, when you go for interviews.
And all of this is Googleable if people want to know more as well,
Yeah.
Do
right?
research. Do
Yes.
research.
Exactly. I mean,
Awesome.
it's so easy. It's just a tip. I mean, you can just type it, right? Like what colors and all that. It will just come out.